We're live on the internet. She's in the way. Yeah, she's in the way. Keep moving. You could scoot a little bit. Yeah. Oh well, it's fine. We're good. You're perfect.
We are about to get started. Let's get settled in. All right. Thanks for coming, guys.
Hey, everybody, wait for your photo.
Woo! Great smile.
So I'm so glad to have this incredible panel of women leaders from the Burning Man Project. Thank you for coming out today. We have Taylor, the founder of Rising Sparks. Woo! Marian, the CEO of the Burning Man Project. You've been stewarding this incredible movement from the beginning. And Katie Hazard, the director of art, who makes all the beauty of the playa come to life. And I'm Hecka. I'm with Frontier Tower. I work on events. So, yeah, great to see you all. How many of you here have been to Burning before? Quick show of hands. Okay. And
How many have not been?
not yet. Playa curious. Maybe after today we can convince some of you. So this at one point was the headquarters of the Burning Man Project.
This very floor was where my desk was. Before I was running. 16th floor, 15th floor, and 7, 8, 9.
Oh wow. For how long?
Less than 5 years. Yeah. 3 to 4.
When I first got hired, we were here in 2013, and I only worked here for a couple months. Somebody said, "What floor did you work on?" And I was like, "I can't remember," but I was only really here briefly. And then they were like, "We're going to move to your neighborhood." So it's now we're in the mission.
This building keeps slowing you back. Into a vortex. Okay, so I would love to get started with some origin stories. Tell me a little bit about, Burning Man is many things to many people. What is it to you? What is it to each of you? Taylor.
Wow, that's a really big question. To me, Burning Man feels like being real, just being raw. I feel like it is authenticity, and that comes in many forms. What do you think, Marian?
I think Burning Man is a place where we can definitely get in touch with our authentic selves, and also a place without boundaries with other people. So we have so many things that keep us from each other. And even in 1995 when I went, it made me want to play and be really present.
For me, the first time I went, I had never heard of it, and it was starting in like 3 days. And my friends were like, "Come to this camp out." And so that's what I thought at first. They didn't know either. I hadn't been either, and that was quite a while ago. Now that I've been really deep in the art there for so long, I sometimes think of it as like the world's largest outdoor art gallery, which is a fun way to think of it. But then as I get like another level deeper to that, I start to think about it's like a place to experiment. Like what could you do if a lot of barriers were removed? You know, it's the only city on earth where you don't need permits to install your public art. Like if we could strip away a lot of these things that like keep us from being wildly creative, what would you do? So I think of it as like an opportunity to experiment.
Yeah, it feels like definitely an experiment and a place where you can just give yourself permission because everyone else around you is giving themselves permission. And that feels really real. And I feel like we are in this place in society right now where we have built up so many walls to protect each other from each other, ironically. And so I think being in a space where art can flow freely and you can also play and experiment, that really breaks down the walls.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, this building has seen, different generations of tenants, so to speak. Like with Burning Man, I would love to hear a little bit about Rising Sparks. Taylor, if you're able to share, tell us about this initiative and what you're working on.
Yeah, for sure. So I honestly never really wanted to go to Burning Man. I thought it was a little bit overpriced, maybe just all tech pros, and I wasn't sure I was gonna ever find a reason to go. And then I randomly met Marian at the MAP Psychedelic Science Conference, and she came up to me. We just had a totally normal conversation. I thought, okay, she's not just a hippie, she's pretty cool. We shared stories about being from Michigan, and then someone came up and was like, oh my God, you're the CEO of Burning Man. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I gotta be a little bit more like formal right now. And then I was like, no, this woman's too chill. We've already like kind of broken down that barrier. And so I proposed to her having an internship with her because I thought, well, I want to learn from a badass woman. And then she was like, okay, propose to me. So I went through and I looked at the website and I was like, wow, there's like so many other badass women. And so I created this project brief for, having a year-long internship with all of the women in the organization who are leading, including Katie. And so I was super, super stoked when Marian's like, all right, I'm gonna take you serious. And she's like, you gotta come to Burning Man. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go to Burning Man. and then I get there and I'm like, wow, okay, this is actually, so much deeper and really does resonate with my generation and all the generations before. And I like to believe all the generations to come. So I really believed in creating a pathway and a collective of people that could help steward the next generation to come in. And that's kind of how Rising Sparks planted its seeds and is still growing and figuring itself out. And so all the people who said they weren't going to go to Burning Man this year, Rising Sparks might be your pathway. But I think, there's just a lot of opportunity, regardless of age, for new people to, find their way in. It's not just tech bros and wealth.
That actually leads perfectly into my next question. When did you realize that the next generation of Burning Man needed a pathway, like an on-ramp into Burning Man? Not just an invitation, but like a real on-ramp.
Yeah, I think a little bit about it being an invitation to have multiple pathways in. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to invite people in to explore all of the different pathways in. And Katie and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, actually, because there's a lot of young artists who, right now they're like, we don't want to be part of society, we want to create, and that rebellion energy is still there. And so I think a lot about, specifically with next generation artists, and how can they go and experiment and apply. And I think Katie might have a little bit more to say about that. But to me, it seems like showing the doors that there's multiple pathways in, and that feels like the on-ramping in itself.
Yeah, I think like every person you ask that goes to Burning Man what their on-ramp is will be a little bit of a different way. Like there's so many ways to have an experience there that like there's many pathways. For me, I started off volunteering, and I just kept getting more and more involved. I lived in Boston at the time, and so I got involved in a regional event that was happening there. And I just kept getting more and more involved. And then suddenly I was building an art project, and then suddenly I was running a theme camp, and then suddenly I was living in San Francisco and working for the art department, not as director. It was like 13 years ago. I started here, like I said, as a temporary, seasonal kind of thing, and then I just stayed, and I keep going, through all the levels, and that's one pathway that I don't like. You don't have to go through all those things. Like it's interesting for me as a leader because I can see, all the different ways that people participate. But people have so many different ways in, and and like you were saying today about artists in the next generation. Like it's really fun for us. We don't ask how old somebody is when they submit their idea. We just, we say yes. And it's interesting to see that, it's all ages, it's all, like all kinds of people bring art to Burning Man. And one of the cool things there is that most of the art is built in community. And so there are a lot of ways that you can say like, oh, I don't think I'm an artist. And yet your friend is like, has some idea and they're like, oh, just come over to my warehouse this weekend and see what you can do. And then, the next thing you know, you're helping, you're learning. And then in a few years, you're the one that's leading the project. So I see a lot of nods, like people that have been on that path by themselves.
Who's done an art project in Burning Man, or been part of an art project in Burning Man? Okay, so-
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Good,
great.
raise your hand, it's fine, you don't have to have it.
It's an on-ramp. There are just-
So Burning Man rejects hierarchy, but it still requires leadership. And at Frontier Tower, we think about decentralized culture, decentralized leadership. I'm curious how that leadership emerges naturally, and is that dynamic harder for women to navigate or easier?
I'll start. And then I'm really interested in what either of these guys say because they both have had journeys in different ways. I think when I came along with Burning Man, we weren't rejecting hierarchy as much as we were demanding collaboration. And I think it's very interesting to find a spot where an anarchic way of organizing is super hard. Like you can't do it when it has to do with safety, if you're dealing with government entities. Like Burning Man on the playa before 1995 or so was more of that. But if you want to take yourself seriously and you want the world to take you seriously, you actually do have to create some level of hierarchy. It is about how you, though, find the right patterns of collaboration and also give people a sense of ownership. And I'm at the top of a pyramid that is sometimes viewed as being, really old and ossified as a government entity, and I want to do everything I can to break that down. I'm in an energy field right now where I'm trying to reverse the way that we organized ourselves in order to be relevant and to endure, and that if you do that too firmly and too hard, you'll resist the opportunities for change and flexibility. And you just started a collaborative where you've had to navigate leadership. I've watched how Tay's had some moments where she wanted everybody to have an equal voice, but then when that happens, it takes forever to make a decision. So then your leadership came to the surface and you guys figured out how to navigate that. And honestly, you guys, I think that that's part of this day and age also, that Larry was the original OG, the six of us that built Burning Man together since 1996, late 96, 3 men, 3 women. But Larry was the one that empowered the women to take leadership. So that was also a really important part to it, was the gender differences just started to float away. And he really empowered the women, and I think the women were, both men and women were interested in collaboration, but the women were really able to negotiate things a lot better than I think at that time the male culture. And now the way a lot of you operate is really the mandate is to be collaborative, and you're looking for that, how do we allow leadership to come to the surface and how do we encourage it, but also encourage the collaboration. I think it's so fascinating. You had some experiences though, without even telling names or anything, but I loved what you went through in the last year. And it's maybe too intimate for you to tell, but she had these moments where she was just like, how do I resolve the fact that I'm organizing chaos, but I want it to self-organize? Like, I don't know if there's anything you can say.
Yeah, I feel like it comes back to the permission giving and just creating the conditions for people to give themselves permissions to step into that leadership. And I'm actually still figuring out how to do that. And it's very, very difficult. And I think if you give people the opportunity to fail and also to grow, there is no failing. And so I think it's really also been such an opportunity to build Rising Sparks collaboratively because, Marian, Katie, and all the other women who have come before me in the Burning Man culture have really carved the way so that there hasn't really felt like a hierarchical component, or I don't really truthfully see gender roles necessarily show up on playa. And I think that goes largely to the fact that the people before us were really just building and had given themselves permission to do so. And so now it's really interesting, again, creating the same kind of conditions and container for women to step into that role. And now it's not necessarily about women or men, but I feel like giving everyone a seat at the table. And Marian and I talk about this a lot of like, we talk about radically including everyone. It's like, yes, you're invited to the table and you get to choose if you want to participate and collaborate. And I think it just goes with also being at the table and giving everyone else the permission themselves. So long-winded answer, it's really hard, but I think that we can do it because we've been doing it for 40 plus years.
I also would add for any of you, as you're building this or any other communities, that having rules of engagement really helps. And either the rules of engagement are done collaboratively by some leadership that see right away that, we need to set the stage for how we want everybody to enter into the space or the idea or the concept. In Larry's case, he wrote the 10 principles a little far into it, and he did it based on observations. But he was, a very charismatic leader, and I think it's really not common to have a good charismatic leader that's really trusted. But I do think that when I see groups they want to bring more people in and they really do have good purpose at creating some rules of engagement, setting the stage. I don't know, Annie, I know this is not all about you, but I just looked at you and I saw what Take 3 did and how you guys had rules of engagement from the very beginning. This is how you're going to perform, this is how you're going to show up, this is what we expect of you. And Burning Man kind of did it. It was pretty raw. So that's what I think about hierarchy is that you can reduce it if you have good rules of engagement.
And I believe Annie's actually working on our rules of engagement at the Frontier Tower now. So, so there's a difference between participating in something and being responsible for it. What does it actually mean to steward a culture? Katie, maybe you can start.
That's a good question. How do you steward culture, right? There's like so many different cultures that people do in different ways. I think if I think about it, it's kind of similar to how are you a good leader? Part of it is getting out of the way, and it's finding what people shine at and helping elevate them, helping smooth the way for people to work together on things. Like I was talking about, you don't need permits for your art at Black Rock City. Like, how do you help people? How do you elevate them and support them in their way? And also understand that it's a collective endeavor. When I think about how I am as a leader, sometimes I need to be the leader when we talk about hierarchy. Like I sometimes need to have somebody make a final decision. But most of the time I think about I think I need to nudge the ship a little in one direction or the other and have some kind of high level thought. But I'm really looking for how can I elevate other people and let them, celebrate them and see where they want to go with what they're doing. So I think that it's like a kind of a holding, as I picture it, like I'm a visual person, I'm it's this big arms and helping people and holding them and helping elevate them, as a group. But there are many ways to do it, right? It's a community effort. What do you think, Marian?
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the points. It's kind of funny to be in my position where I can be accused of administrating or over managing. And at my best in my role, I do think it's stewardship. And it means it's not about me. Usually it's about something bigger than ourselves that we're here for. And that certainly means taking the ego out of it and recognizing sometimes that you want to really do something, but you're actually in it for the culture. The culture has certain ways in which it will function well. I think that's a really, really important thing. And it does relate to ego. If you're in a group and you're collaborating on something and you've seen I'll use an example. I like the way that we entered. You have a lot of chaos downstairs. It's small. But the person who said hello to us and his eyes were kind of bright, he's like, oh, your name, and and then he pushed the button and he smiled. And like, that is a cultural piece. Like building it downtown and someone just says, okay, fine, you're good. And here's your bracelet, and here's your sticker. And so that's a good rule of engagement. So if your culture here is to be friendly and to make people feel welcome, then everybody is a steward for the culture of making you feel welcome. And that way, if someone makes a mistake outside of the boundaries of that culture, then it's not about them, but it's about how did you show up or not show up, because our culture is about being welcome. And that's really cool. When everybody can be a steward of the culture. And it's by showing up yourself and actually being a representative of it and being a good example even outside of your culture. That's what I love about what you guys are doing here in the building. I do think what you're doing is cultural. I think the way you're entering it and the way that you're learning from it and really the vibe and the friendliness, it's very, very cultural that you're doing it.
Thank you. Anything you'd add, Taylor?
I think Marian said that really well, and Katie did as well too. I think when you're contributing to something greater than yourself, that's when you feel like you're participating. And that participation is what is stewarding the thing that you're embodying. So I think you guys said that really well.
Katie, back to you. Burning Man art feels like it just springs out of nowhere. So tell us about what are the invisible layers of collaboration and mentorship and leadership that actually make all those projects possible?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes I meet people and they're like, you work for Burning Man? Like, you have employees there? And it's kind of one of those things, I'm sure you guys have that happen too, where it's kind of like people just imagine it all like springs up like a dream. And so I feel like with the art department, we've got 7 full-time year-round staff. We have probably about 15 other people that are seasonal, that, every artist that submits their idea. We have almost 400 sculptural artworks on the playa every year, which is amazing. And every person that brings an artwork gets matched up with someone on my team, so they have a guide and a champion and a single point of contact the whole way through. So some of it is, us supporting artists as much as we can to achieve their concept. A lot of it, though, I will say, is artists supporting each other. There's a really beautiful, long history of mentorship, official and unofficial, that happens. That, like I was saying before, sometimes you'll join a crew, and then you learn from doing that. We think of our program a lot as a capacity building engine. That this might be the first time you've ever filled out a grant proposal, or managed volunteers, or managed a budget, or there's so many different skills it takes to bring an artwork to in the middle of nowhere on no grid. That there's really a lot of learning that can happen in there, and people really like to teach each other, which is great. Like, I love to, sometimes when I know the answer to something, I'm like, no, let this person tell them, because you learn a lot in the telling as well, and the teaching to somebody else. And so that's, I think, the beautiful piece of what I see on the art department is we try to sort of stay out of the way in some respects and see what else bring up. And honestly, my experience of the art was different before I worked there and knew all the stories. Like, I would love to just show up and have my mind blown. And now it's also like, I love to show up and be like, I know so many stories about this person that brought this particular thing, and it's a different kind of treat from this angle. So, yeah. That's fun to talk about things.
Question for all of you. Do you think the playa changes how women lead, or does it just remove obstacles that might be standing in the way?
I think the biggest obstacle is ourselves. And I know I keep bringing this back to permission, but for me, playa feels like it's the space to give myself permission. And so I think that's a really hard question. For me, it feels like the boundaries are more open and fluid, and then I'm able to tap into being able to give myself permission. And I think that comes back to my first point that I said about Burning Man. To me, feels like this really raw and real experience. Not just because you're in the desert and it's really fucking hard, but also because, there's just like this rawness to it. And I think in that rawness, you do feel like you're giving yourself permission to lead. And I don't know, I feel kind of like such a spirit and soul out there. It doesn't really necessarily feel like I'm out here in my physical body. But there's also something grounding in that freedom and permission that I do feel very empowered as a woman. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Marian, on that really difficult, challenging question.
I love seeing people up on the roof, by the way. We used to use the roof to smoke. It was called watching the birds. That's where Larry Harvey would climb up there and smoke his cigarettes, and then at 5:30 people could smoke whatever they wanted. But I just saw someone walking. It was really, really sentimental. Well, Larry popped in my head also. That was like a moment just now, because at one point someone in my life had said something about my work at Burning Man, and it was early on, and it wasn't making any money, and I was wasting my life doing what I was doing, kind of comment. And you should be going to do something else. And I realized that for me, Burning Man was becoming really empowering as leader. I wasn't in my position here, but I was overseeing communications and technology and legal and government relations, and I had more responsibility than I ever dreamed. And it was the man that gave it to me. It was Larry. He was the leader, and he gave it to the women really quickly. He gave it to Harley, he gave it to Crimson. Crimson's built the art department, and Katie's come along and she's expanded it. And I'm positive that Burning Man, as a concept, gave me more opportunity for leadership. And then the theory of being together and building together allowed me to allow things to drop away. So your question has two sides to it in my mind. I oversaw the DPW, so a lot of you have been to Burning Man, so you already know what the DPW is. I don't have to tell you. For those that haven't been, it's the Department of Public Works. It is the crew. It's kind of like the carnies, but they build and take it down. And through chance, I oversaw it for a number of years. And I remember the first year that I oversaw it, I was so excited because I knew that I could go and pound in tea sticks. And when I was doing communications and legal and government relations, like I went out there and I hung out, I partied, and everybody was like super fun, and women were like welding and everything like that. But nobody had ever asked me if I wanted to pound in tea sticks, because it was the guys and the girls that did it, but I was like the office girl kind of person. And I love pounding in the tea sticks. Like I would go out early and wrap the tape in your hands, and you go out early in the morning, and there's 60 people, and you start pounding tea sticks to make that 9-mile fence around Black Rock City. And I remember feeling, fuck yeah. I thought men and women at Burning Man are always looking to each other to offer that opportunity. And I think gender is pretty non-existent at Burning Man. It exists, but it's not like you're a girl and you can't do that. I watched the guys in the metal shop, and the women that run the guys in the metal shop, and then the women that run the car, and the cars and the man, and like, I watch it all the time. And I do think Burning Man is, by its essence, designed for us to empower each other. And then that gives us a way to burst through what society had done, was restricting women and not giving us as many options. So yeah, I think I'm doing more in leadership. I've always thought I was going to be a leader doing something kind of cool, but this is way cooler than I had thought. And I think our culture gave me that opportunity.
Yeah, the word that comes to me if you've been to Burning Man, you've heard the word duocracy. And that's basically like, there's so much that needs to happen there. Like you start with nothing and you build a whole city and then you take it all down. And it's the kind of place where you don't know who is right next to you. Like, that we have several hundred volunteers in the art department, and we've got people that are eye doctors and physicists and like chemists and whatever, all kinds of walks of life. And you're just in there doing something with them. And if something needs to be done, somebody steps up and says, like, I'm going to do that thing. And they kind of get more social capital by being the one that's going to step up and do the thing. And so that's, I think, an unusual way, because when you think about how other ways, you have to be the right person or know the right somebody in order to get that opportunity. But there, it's like, if you're willing to go do the thing, like, people will make room for you to run the thing if you want to.
There's a bit of a duocracy here too, I would say. The frontier tower. Taylor. Rising Sparks was created to close a generational gap And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what inspired it for you, and what does that on-ramp for young burners to step into leadership look like in your eyes?
This is a great question. I feel like when I came to Burning Man, like I said, I never wanted to go. I was surrounded by older generations and people who had been burning for 20 plus years. And they definitely had a lot to share with me, some good stories, some jaded, and somewhere in between. But there was always this openness. And, speaking of gender roles, I feel like it's very non-binary there. And I feel like there's not this specific constraint. And so knowledge and experience can flow across generations and across different types of people. And like Katie said, there's so many different types of people out there. And so when I was out there, I was like, there's got to be other people who are my age. I know this because this is really fucking cool. And Gen Z, even though we're always on our phones, we really do like cool things. And there's a lot of cultural components that resonate with our generation. And so I went out there and I was like, all right, next year I'm going to find all of the people under the age of 33, because I looked at the census and I saw that there have been, over time, which, by the way, is slowly becoming less and less and less of a generational gap. But all that being said, I was like, okay, I'm going to bring 30 of my friends under 30. We helped them all out through Burning Man Project, and they went, their minds were blown. They were like, I want to contribute to this. I want to be a steward. How do we keep going? And how do we also connect with more people in our age range, and also bring in the people who've been doing this for a really long time, because they know how to do things. I remember last year, I had no idea how to use an impact drill at all, and this awesome old burner was next to us, and he had been out there like 20 plus years, came out, he's like, you guys really need a break. You need to drink some water. And like, even though it seems so small, I really needed that water right then. And it felt like such a big impact, but then it became very clear that this isn't just about one generation. This is about the next generation of creating more pathways in for more folks to experience this, because it resonates with all types of people, because at the end of the day, we just want to be real. And I feel like that's the intention of Rising Sparks. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, that's what feels good.
Well, I'm curious what you think older generations of burners miss that you are seeing with fresh eyes, and also conversely, maybe what younger burners, haven't experienced yet.
I feel like we don't know as much, so it's not as complicated. And then once you start to get more integrated and more involved, you're like, whoa, this is really, you feel like even more sparked, and you're like, whoa, this is really, really, really cool. When you already were thinking, whoa, this is really cool. What do you think, Marian? This is really cool.
Well, I've watched the experience I had when I went to New York last year and met the young people that I introduced you to and now friends with. The one of them that didn't come to Burning Man, but when I met this woman, she's about 23 or 24, and she was just wearing her cute outfit. I didn't say it to her, she was here because I really like her. She was just like, have you seen Instagram? And she's like a playwright, and she produces plays, and I was like, okay. And then she admitted, and she kind of warmed up. Like, listen, my media is Instagram. Like, my stories are from Instagram. So what I see about Burning Man is from Instagram. And I thought, well, that was like a learning thing for me. And when I started meeting these other folks and introducing them to Tay, I realized that that was the filter. And if we can do the storytelling, like, that's why I like being on this panel with Taylor. Like, Taylor, for me and Taylor and Katie to be here together with you guys is because I think we all represent parts of what we should be doing about storytelling for Burning Man. And I wanted Tina and her friends to actually hear Taylor's side of the story, because Taylor broke through. Like, Taylor didn't think she wanted to go, and Instagram or whatever else was the wall. And then these other gals were like, "You're so cute." She's like, "Yeah, I write plays." You know, and now part of this little gang has started coming, and they're all like, "What the fuck are we thinking?" And when I asked them, it's like they were afraid of camping because they came from New York. Money wasn't the biggest problem, but access. Like you asked about an on-ramp. How do you learn about it? How do you find a project? Do you have to camp with a group? So I think the young people don't realize that it isn't as complicated. It's kind of like Taylor said, it looks like it's super complicated and it's actually deeper. So if you think it's too complicated, then just bouncing into an area where you're not afraid. And so I think the young people think it's more complicated than it is, and it's a game to get through the fear. I think the older generation assume that Gen Z only wants to be on their phones, and that Gen Z is on a path of being lost through technology. And I've seen just the opposite from Taylor and Phillips. They're yearning for connectivity and they want to create. And that's my observation.
Yeah, I was thinking similar things to what you're saying in some respects, Marian, about Instagram and how nowadays people have an expectation of what Burning Man is like before they go, but it's only told by the voices that are putting themselves out there in that way. And so there's so much more to it, I think, than what you can see, but that's hard to convey. And that's why it's fun for us to like get to tell stories in our ways and share more about how we find Burning Man to be. The other piece is like, you know, when I started going to Burning Man, also that you couldn't have your phone there, and now you can have your phone there. And there is a generation of people, I think, that have a really hard time getting off their phone. But then there's like that next generation, you know, my nephew who's in college is coming to Burning Man this year, and he's excited to not be on his phone the whole time. I was like, oh, I can maybe help you if you need Wi-Fi for anything. And he was like, no, like he and his girlfriend are like happy to not have that as a part of it. So I think that, you know, there's even like the next generation under that even. So, but I think being able to come without a lot of expectations is a piece that's hard to do now. But I think the idea is if you could just open your mind that it's more than what you see. I think that's the message.
So Burning Man has always been about experimenting with new ways of living together. What is one experiment that hasn't been tried that you would like to see the next generation try?
That's a good one. Well, that's a kind of complicated question because you talk about experience and work. And it's like a whole broad, super broad answer. I guess in a general sense, I'll answer it kind of differently, and whatever that's sort of coming up for me is, I think, again, I like visiting you guys here at Frontier Tower because I think you all represent, excuse me, I think you're representing the experimentation that we need to be doing with culture in general. And that Burning Man doesn't have to be all big. Like people think there's big camps and there's a big camp and how big is my camp and how big things like this. I think this generation is much more communitarian. It's caring about what people's thoughts are and listening. So I don't know that I can say what could this next generation do that I'm looking for. I think you're doing it. I really do.
That's a great answer. Okay, so I mean, what we're doing here is we are creating our own kind of cultural laboratory for a post-AGI singularity future. And, you know, thinking ahead 20, 30 years from now, what do you think will be the same about Burning Man and what might be completely different?
I think it will continue to shape shift and find new ways of expressing itself. I feel like it's a living, breathing organism, and it's going to continue to take new shapes and new forms as new people come in, and some people, you know, find ways to bring that outside of the organism. And I think that the way it's expressed will continue to change, but I think at the root of it, it is still that realness and that that crave for us as humans to just be authentically connected to one another and to also be able to express that. And so I don't really necessarily think that one person can possibly predict this large, massive mycelium network of people and all of the different communities and organizations and even companies and different friend groups and even yourself. I don't think that there's one way that we can say will the future be, but we can invite people to come build it with us.
Yeah, as you're speaking, Tim, on the same path as you, it's hard to say. I mean, 30 years ago, would we have seen this is where it was going to be now? You know, like it's yes and no in different ways. I think the regional network within the Burning Man organization and all the work that happens globally, you know, the almost 100 events that happen all around the world. Like at this point now, more people are going to those events than to Black Rock City. The art that's coming up all over the world throughout the whole network, I think, is certainly a path where I imagine things moving as time goes on. You know, and I think if you think about like post AGI kind of singularity times, like we're in such a world where so much happens. We don't use our bodies. We're not outside all that much, at least in my life. Like I spend a lot of time in meetings and on Zoom and at my desk. And Burning Man's a time when I'm outside for, you know, several weeks. Like I'm in the desert. I'm in like this environment. I'm using my body in ways that I don't get to use it all the time. I'm like, it feels very like real and visceral in a way that sometimes my life here feels like I'm just on screens with people so much. And so I can imagine that will become even more needed as time goes on, and that we will look forward to having more ways that we are like really connecting like face to face with other people. That's I think one of the most magical parts about it.
I would add that I've often thought that my job was to steward the culture in ways so that if Black Rock City doesn't happen, that Burning Man still happens. And I used to guess that what would it look like? 30 years ago, I was guessing what it would look like in 30 years. And I think we kind of saw this in a way. I know Larry did in 1991. He made a film where he said he saw people coming across the playa and he just thought there would be lots and lots of people. But I now think it's not all about the playa. We didn't really realize how the regional network was going to come to the surface. So I think what Burning Man is even more evolved than what Black Rock City is. That Burning Man post AGI singularity. I love AI. I think it's fascinating. It's absolutely changing our lives. I think it's worth being aware of it. She sees it in applications, but it's not like we block them. It's just like we're using filters to be like, oh, okay, well, this is, so now you've got better drawings than you did before, but that means there's more of a standard for people to complete what they put in their drawings. I think it's about Burning Man culture. I am absolutely positive when we keep on the path we're on that the word Burning Man culture will be more than Black Rock City. That the way in which everybody can be doing something that clearly you've got a lot of burners here, so maybe Burning Man's affected your culture. So that Burning Man might be an adjective to describe the way in which people believe and are connecting together, and that the AI, I guess the AI should be scary, of course, it could be, and I just believe I'm creating the antidote. I'm creating, and I'm part of and collaborating with something that is absolutely designed for humans to trust each other and build together, and that those trust networks, the human-human trust network, that's why my fear is less. Is if we keep doing what we're doing and gathering together and learning to trust each other, building things together, collaborating, it's so much fucking fun. And that's where I think we're going to be okay. It's doing things together in person.
Last question for all of you before we open it up to the audience. What is one lesson from the playa, more broadly, Burning Man culture that you think the default world needs to hear right now?
Can I swear? I'm just saying, I think I already did a couple times. I would say get off your phone. The algorithm is maybe not as real as you think it is. Remove the filters. Get off your phone. That's what I would say. So I feel like out there on Playa, and as they mentioned, all the other different networks and events and cultures and communities that have come from Burning Man, it feels like the filters are removed.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, what I've learned a lot through Burning Man is that I have more control over my day-to-day experience than I thought before I was introduced to Burning Man. I've understood that I have a lot more agency in my life. Like I've talked about, there's so many different ways you can plug into Burning Man, and I feel like that's true when I come home too. I'm like, do I like all this? Did I just start doing this because I thought that's how you were supposed to live? Like, what else can I change? Like, how many things are within my control? What choices am I making that I could really design my day-to-day to be more what I want it to be? And so like coming here to Fresh Air Tower, I'm like, yeah, that's what you guys are doing. You're like designing a place and a space that you can have like be more the way you want it to be. So I think I know there's different circumstances and levels of privilege that mean that we all have different amounts of how much control we have, but where you can to make that choice to make your lived experience more authentic and more fun, go for it.
Yeah, I would build on that. There is a writer, he's actually a professor, I think at Harvard, maybe he's in his 80s, so maybe he's retired, but there's a film about him that's on Netflix. His name is Robert Putnam, and he wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And it's a fascinating journey he went on to try to understand the way in which society in America, and then he studied Europe, and levels in which people are happy and they're being productive. And I particularly got interested in a portion of his journey where I'm from the Midwest, and I remember being in the Midwest and not talking about politics. I didn't know who people voted for. I was in a small town. My mother went to the PTA meetings. You know, I went to Catholic church until I was at an age where I particularly want to go anymore. And the politics now is such a divisive way in which America is existing. And what I got from Robert Putnam was that when we were more into the churches and the PTA and there was social architecture, that people wanted to, they wanted to do everything in their power to maintain their social relationships. So they didn't find things that were divisive to talk about. They actually talked about their children and education. And what I think we really need is what Burning Man is offering. And if it wasn't Burning Man, I would be seeking places where we could actually accept each other and converse about things we have in common rather than converse about things that we have that are different and get angry when other people have a different opinion. You can get angry with different opinions at Burning Man. It's somewhat counterproductive because it's such a joyful place. So you might switch really quickly and go find something that you want to do with another person about a different religion, a different country, a different politics, a different whatever. Because actually that is bridging our differences is really what we need, and it's not just in America, we need it all over the world. We need a platform where we can accept each other in our humanity and our joy and our purpose, which is actually not to hurt one another. Clearly our purpose is actually to love one another, and that's what the world needs.
That's a mic drop. All right, opening up to our audience members. Any burning questions? Yes.
So my filter for Burning Man was just having heard for years and years and years. It was weird that I didn't go, and I also saw on Instagram. But when I finally made it out there, I remember the first time I walked into the temple, which is for grieving, I was so blown away. I was like, if this entire party was just here for this purpose, this would be the most amazing thing. And so I just love to know how that tradition started. Was that from the beginning?
You're the storyteller now.
Yeah, well, in the year 2000, there were two artists that had been coming to Burning Man already, and they had a friend who passed away in a motorcycle accident not that long before the Burning Man event. And they wanted to do something about it. They wanted to build some kind of shrine, some kind of memorial, and so they built the first one, and it wasn't in the spot where it now is. It was, it was an art project. Like it was, they wanted to do this thing. They were moved by the loss of their friend. And it became a memorial for many other people than this friend. It was open so that everyone could, you know, leave a memento or write something meaningful about people they had lost. And it was so well loved that I wasn't there at this point, but the organization said, would you be willing to do that again? Because, you know, that was really a meaningful and important part. You know, like Black Rock City, where the Burning Man event is a city. It's got, you know, all the things that a city has. And it didn't have a very clear spiritual center, I think, before that. The first temple was the same year as the first year I went. So I don't know how it was without it. But then it's become a tradition. So since 2000, it's been that. And the two artists that did it the first year, one was David Best, and he was the one that came back and brought it the next year. And the temple was led by David Best for a lot of years. And then we opened it up to other artists, and then it became its own, I made it its own grant program in 2018. And we actually have this year's temple architect and another crew member here that I saw a little while earlier, Ian and Michelle. I don't know if you're still.
Raise your hands up.
It's an amazing place. I mean, it's people grieve there, but also people have weddings there, and people have but you walk in there and it's palpable, like the energy in that space. And I agree with you. It's really one of my most favorite parts about the Leopard City experience. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Do you have anything to add?
Hi, so I'm an urban planner, and my biggest on-ramp to Burning Man was Black Rock City and like the urban form and everything. And in fact, I'm on a panel in a couple of weeks at the American Association of Geographers Conference. If anybody in here is a geographer and going to that, and it's all about Burning Man, burner geographies. So look us up and come to the panel. But anyway, and I live here in San Francisco, and the first time I went to Black Rock City, I came back and I was like, wow, I feel like I've unlocked a different level to San Francisco, if that makes any sense. Because I walk around, I'm like, that's Burning Man art, like especially now on JFK Promenade. And so my question to you, mostly I think Katie, but anybody else can answer too, is like, so obviously there's a big connective tissue between the public art that we have in the city of San Francisco and the Black Rock City. And I was wondering if that goes into, you know, the knowledge that the large scale art may make its way back to San Francisco ever, like is a factor, like if that ever goes through your mind in selecting the artwork that is in Black Rock City, and if there's like, you know, how you think about that and how you sort of like, if you work with the city at all to identify things that might, you know, be beneficial for the city. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. I'm actually on that panel at the American Association of Geographers. Just a little short piece I'm doing on our program there. Yeah, it's an interesting question about how, you know, a lot of artists design something for Black Rock City and they don't think beyond that point. And like we were saying, it's the place where you don't have permits, but if you don't want to have your work in storage afterwards, you have to think about, well, I want this someplace in a place that is going to make me have permits. And so we've done a lot to try to help artists think through, like early on at the design stage, you know, if you wanted to install this somewhere else, what can you do now before you build it that will enable you to be able to set it up well? You know, sometimes like the Flaming Lotus Girls have had projects with fire, but they plan it out ahead of time so that they can find a way to use LEDs for that instead of for a flame effect, because you can't, you know, easily have a flame effect here in the city. So we do try to work with artists to help them think through, like to ask those questions early on. When I started going to Burning Man, I lived on the East Coast and nobody had heard of Burning Man, and there was no Burning Man art in the city squares. And I would come visit friends here, and I was like, oh, there's art from Burning Man just like out here. Like, you know, people know what it is and where it's from. And I do think it's one of the special, like this relationship between the city of San Francisco and Black Rock City is really special. You know, this is where like, Burning Man happened here first for a bunch of years before we moved to the Black Rock Desert. And in terms of thinking about future placement for artists too, we talk about how we have a registration, not an application, because we actually accept anyone that wants to bring any kind of art they want to bring. There's not a curatorial process in terms of selection. We do have a grant program, so there's a selection in that, but otherwise, whatever you can think of, you know, we'll ask you some questions about things, but for the most part, everyone is invited. So we don't think necessarily about what will have a good life afterwards, but we do think sometimes around, you know, we have some people on my team that are seasonal employees that also work with installing the art here, and sometimes we think, oh, maybe if they are working with artists that might place their work here afterwards, that will be a good relationship building to think about what can get placed somewhere else. And it's been really fun to see the new big art loop here pop up. The women that organize the Building 180 that does a lot of the curatorial choices for that are burners and longtime burners, and we work closely with them to identify projects that we think will be a good fit for here. And it's just fun. It's a nice way for people that are not able to come to Black Rock City for one reason or another to get to experience Burning Man art. You know, you can bring your grandma to see the dragon in Golden Gate Park. You know, you can it's a. I feel like that's a really nice element of it too.
Can I add something?
Please, yeah.
I would say also, you guys were talking about culture. We also subtly helped that from the other side. And that came in the form of a woman named Hillary Sheep, who is the mayor of Reno. And there is a mayor's conference, an annual mayor's conference, I think they do twice a year. And they're for the medium-sized cities, mayors. And they met in Reno a couple of times. And Hillary invited them to come out on the bus tour to Burning Man. And Marty, who oversees government relations, and a couple of other team members got an art car and took around 25 mayors from different cities. And the first time I remember they were like, just hop on the bus. And I met somebody from Raleigh, Durham. You know, I was meeting people from cities that were like the size of Reno and maybe a little bigger. And they've been doing that every year. Now Hillary's no longer the president of that association. And so she doesn't have control over having those meetings in August right there the week before Burning Man, but she deliberately was bringing mayors from small communities. And then the other piece we were doing is we were trying to match some mayors with the regional network leadership that's out in the world. And the regional network leadership is all organic. They come to the surface, they're vetted, and then they help create community. And so we started doing a sort of speed dating. It was like, oh, we met from Raleigh, Durham, and we met the person from, Albany. And I just heard the other day that there is somebody one of the mayors now, a couple of years later, is now activating ideas because they want the art. So maybe we're not making it for Black Rock City, but art is happening in the communities. The burners are doing art. They're doing it now on the East Coast. They're doing it in the Southwest. And we're hopeful that we can stimulate from both sides. So we've got Black Rock City, but that's why we help stimulate the regional network, is that we can stimulate the network to then go into their cities and make proposals for art. And that is actually starting to happen.
Hi, yes, my name is Marco, and
Marco.
with the culture growing so fast, technology, commodities, everyone being a DJ now, I'm wondering, what are some hard decisions you've had to make to protect the culture at the expense of potentially disappointing some people?
Well, a really well-known one that we've had to pivot on a couple of different times has been around deliveries of RVs and convenience tools of convenience. I would say we first saw in 2013 and 2014 for sure, people were asking, we have a big stage or we have a big truck with a bunch of things in it, someone's gonna set up a stage or they're gonna set up a tent or whatever, and we want to come in the back gate. And we were like, what do you mean you have this big thing? Why? Just wait in line. No, there's Teamsters, and Teamsters are paid by the hour and they can't wait for 4 hours. So, oh, really? So we learned really fast there were large generators, large refrigerated trucks, large staging, and packs of RVs that were just getting brought in and then just lined up. And we definitely saw that 2013, 2014 spades. I remember being still here in this office and we had a meeting with a couple of people that were starting to organize producers, burners that had built camps or built art. They were suddenly asked by people with means to build camps for them. And their first response is, well, sure, I'd rather be the one to build it than have you some random person build it. When we came out of the pandemic, we stopped delivery allowed of RVs. So what that did was there were about 7 different companies, and they were delivering more than 700 RVs. They would all get staged on the edge of Black Rock City, and then when their clients came, the RVs could get brought to the camp. And we also taxed it, and we made hundreds of thousands of dollars on that taxing system. But it was too much, and we felt like that was contributing to it. And so we created a new rule that you drive your own RVs in. Well, we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars from that, and that was a really big choice. Now, we loosened it up a little bit because the pushback that I thought was fair around it was that there were people that are like, it's not safe for me to drive an RV, or I'm building a whole camp and it's helping us out. And so we loosened it up and allowing camps that we knew and people we knew, and we sort of said if you were established, like there's a bunch of ways in which we loosened it back up a bit. But that was very unpopular and people were very pissed, and that affected donors. So we were getting attacked, and I have a donor. He finally gave us something, but he was pissed. I mean, he's part of a camp, and that camp said, well, we had to buy a pickup truck because now we had to bring in all our trailers. I was like, well. But then when I was, trying to have a conversation with him in the winter of 2024, another person was like, he is not interested in giving you anything until he pays off that truck. Like, he paid it off, and he said in value, because he paid for it in cash, but he said in value, he wanted to use it for a couple more years until it wasn't mad still. And I was kind of like, well, see, that kind of was the point. So you got a stupid truck, and now you're bringing in trailers that you own that are sitting in other places, and you still have another 20 RVs that you're, renting from other people. But that was a super crazy hard one. It affected us financially, but it was the right thing to do because we reset the button. I honestly believe that if you've been to Burning Man the last couple of years, the population's definitely less. Like we peaked in 2018 and 2019 at 79,000, and last year was 72,000. And I'm absolutely positive that we affected our population. We stunted the bucket list thing for sure. We stunted the Ibiza crowd making a decision in August that they're going to come to Burning Man and that they can because there are all these camps that were selling $50,000 packages to come to Burning Man. So we made some decisions that have stunted things a little bit and put us in a financial challenge. But I think for the most part, that was a really good decision because it's changing the vibe a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. You've seen this growth from a small community to this massive project with ground Can you share some anecdotes around how that felt, like scary, time, exciting, and then also what you did with there from the tower thinking about as the project grows, what kind of parts of the world should be preserved, how many interfaces communities stuff. Yeah,
That's a great question. I had moments of being literally afraid. I remember in 2000, 2001, and I had a margarita, and I was sitting there, just one margarita, sitting by the fire, and I looked up over the doorway of my RV. I was standing in the stairs because I could get some height, and I saw lights coming and coming and coming and coming. And the margarita affected my sensibilities. Because if I hadn't had a margarita, I might not have been so scared, but I was scared. I was like, there are tens of thousands of people coming here. Someone could die, and it's my fault. So there were definitely some scary moments. And then I was like, okay, no, one margarita is good enough. And I really did. I don't drink much at Burning Man. I really don't do any drugs at Burning Man because it's been too hard to be responsible for other people. And I know people that have been adjacent to situations and accidents happen and someone just took their MDMA and like died moment. Yeah. So my fear is always that as a person responsible, that I do the right thing, that I show up in the right way, and that I'm always available. I mean, that's my whole piece. In general, though, I was not afraid of creating something really creative. And there were moments where it was hard. Like before we were in this office, we were in a crazy office. Like we had the one conference room table had 3 legs. And the other one was like these white buckets that we piled on top of it, and it looked like it was going to fall over at any time. And I remember saying, and we were barely making the salary. Like we did payroll one day, and we couldn't afford about the 6 of us running it just didn't take payroll. And I was scared that and this is real. I've never really told this story, but I told it in other recordings. But I thought it was possible we were fucking people up. That creativity is a dangerous thing. I was so scared because it felt so empowering. And I really was afraid we were ruining people's lives by actually really, really encouraging creativity and self-expression. And Michael was like, I think I'm going crazy. I don't think, I want to go work for Visa Corp. It's a true story. My wife said, we're all going a little bit crazy. But that was his way of saying, yeah, no, don't give up on that. But what part two of the question was? For you guys here. I mean, I was here a little more than 6 months ago in August, and I had sort of similar questions that people brought to me afterwards. I think you have to take care. If you really want to create community, you have to take care. But I really do think you have to draw some lines in the sand. We have this radical inclusion principle, and that was under a lot of fire because people think, well, that means everybody has got to be there. And it's not true. It's like Taylor said. I asked Larry one time, I said, what are you supposed to do? Because we had regional contacts that there were sexual predators trying to show up. And the regionals were like, well, what are you supposed to do? If you welcome people in, but if they're breaking the social values of the group and they're stepping outside the boundaries of what you set up, then it is okay to ask them to leave and go find another place. And I would guess that that's probably a piece that you all might end up going through if not, because if you're very, 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 very welcoming, then what happens when you end up with someone who's dangerous or unkind or mean or steals things? Like there's a lot of other worse things than that, but those start affecting the community values. And to be able to act on that fast enough in ways that are compassionate, but really set the stage for like, we're in for something bigger than your bullshit. That's the important stuff, I think.
I have one more question related to this from a friend who wasn't able to make it tonight, but she was wondering if consent would ever be added as the 11th principle.
That comes up sometimes. You know, I think that the 10 principles are humanistic, and there are a lot of ways in which we need to be treating each other better and well. And consent is part of the way we should be treating each other in general. I think that we're not really likely to add another principle at this point. There have been requests at different times for different principles. It's the one that comes up for people, but I think these are cultural expectations we have to create for each other as required, no matter what we're doing. Burning Man, our principles are actually meant to create a culture that is even more different than our regular lives. The consent should be part of our regular lives in general. We don't need to go to Burning Man to expect that. We should expect it all the time. Hi.
That is so unique in this of like humans as a species. How did you know this was what you wanted to do?
I was looking at the other two, seeing if there's a way for them to talk, so I don't have to talk.
She's looking right at you.
I was out of college. I worked in an ad agency, so I was in the belly of that beast in Boston. And I was a writer, an undergraduate for writing, so I was not really using my writing. I was advertising, writing PR, and I kind of thought, it was kind of fun, but it was kind of weird. Then I worked for a law firm, and I was a legal secretary, but I was a smart legal secretary. Legal secretary is smart, but I was the one that they were like, you're super weird, why are you here? And I was like, well, I wanted to do something different. I didn't love what I was doing, and I wanted to learn something different, and I loved working at a law firm. And then I moved to California because I'd come out here for a visit with a friend, and Boston was too cold, and I was like, California made me feel much freer than I had felt in Boston. And the minute I got here, I realized that part of myself was waiting for something. And I worked in sales, another place that is not one of those great places for freedom. And then I fell ill, but it wasn't. It was just psychosomatic because I was so unhappy doing sales. And I got a $10,000 check. This is 30 years ago, a $10,000 check. I didn't know what to do with that money. And I realized that hadn't made me any happier. And I went back to school at the Academy of Art, which was Academy of Art College at the time, and university now. And I took photography classes to get a master's in photography. And that's where I saw photos of Burning Man. And I did not know I'd be part of Burning Man. I saw the photos in 92 or 93. But when I went to Burning Man in 1995, I really had a powerful experience. I was working in a company that was doing web design. Web design was super new. It was C.E. Robs before that. That's one of the media. Those were very flexible. And I was that girl that just came out of art school. But I went to Burning Man and I came back and I didn't want to be there for another minute. And I didn't know I was going to work for Burning Man. I started dating the founder, Larry, after 95 or 96. Met him, started dating him, and I knew that I had the skills to help do what he and the other friends were trying to do. And it was creative. So I went on a journey that went from advertising and sales, and I remember I used to have red pumps, and my red bow in my hair, my red nails matched, and all that's beautiful. But I chased a lot of things that people chase. I went on the in thing, and I knew it. I tasted them all. No, doing something creative was absolutely, it's been really rewarding. It's changed my life. Made me a better person.
Some of you just kept listening to what felt.
Yeah.
And did that over and over.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Regardless of the consequences. Yeah, my resume was like a zigzag. I was just asked to send a message. My nephew is graduating high school, and my sister said there's some ritual. They're sending letters and reading letters from family members and whatever. So I sent him a letter. I'm not married. I've never had children. And I had two aunts and an uncle, and one aunt never married, and the other one married, and the other had kids. So I have no nephews. I have no cousins. And I think that I had a pedigree of one's a cultural anthropologist, one just retired as a geologist at UTEP at 80. My pedigree was, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, my pedigree was people that made interesting choices. And so I didn't see it as damaging my resume or my reputation. I was just gonna keep going. Yeah, that's how I found it. And so I told my nephew, take the road less traveled, and create an interesting life, and don't be afraid.
All right, final question.
Hi, name's Ninad. Can't wait to be back on the playa this year. If you could wave your magic wand and remove one constraint that the org faces that would make Burning Man the most awesome version that you have the vision for it as, what would that one constraint or point of friction be?
Well, the very first thing I think is revenue, and that's kind of boring. But I'm like, imagine if I could fund it. We just went through the process of making our selections for who's going to get a grant for this coming year. We had more than 500 people apply, and we only have the money and the staff capacity to pick 75 of those. And I don't know if I would have picked all 500, but there were certainly several hundred that were just exceptional. And I would love to help make those dreams come true, but we just don't have the staff or the funding for that. But I also think about the government. Holding our, I don't work very closely with government relations, so you could probably say more, but if we had it on land where we got to make all the decisions, I feel like that would be a nice freedom.
Yeah, I don't mind the federal land, because private land has more complications, so I do feel differently, because elected officials oversee planning departments and things like that. But our biggest impediment is the government. They cover the costliest, and they take the most energy and time. I'm flying to Washington, D.C. next week. We go annually. I see Republicans and Democrats and House and Ways and Means and all this kind of stuff. I think that's an interesting one, Katie, the government. I have to say, I think our ticket prices are really something I wish was. The more fundraising we have, the more we can keep the ticket prices lower. Like, that's literally how it works. So I would love there to be, because people are spending so much money to be there, the original ticket prices better. Yeah. Do you have
That's your magic wand, Tay.
Can I tell my boss?
Can I tell my boss SOPs? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good, I think the ticket pricing, just affordability also maybe anything that's boring. There's not a lot of boring there, but
Yeah.
anything that is boring.
I would make the weather more consistent. And I would figure out how the wait times, which is what we're in the middle of doing right now. The wait time, getting in last year, even with weather, was just ridiculous. But I read a really great document today. We have a task force that's going across departments looking at the ways to improve the wait times coming in. I think 4 hours is reasonable. Like I would wait 4 hours, but I wouldn't wait 18 hours. People did last year, and the weather would contribute to it.
Also, I'm curious to hear afterwards what your magic wand would say. Away in our one, so.
I think it would be the wait time also.
I think we have one last
Right.
question.
I can't really see you, Katie.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Kat. I work in and I'm super passionate about decentralized identity and technology, specifically for and using it as infrastructure for new societies and for artists' empowerment and for building culture. So I'm curious what you guys, or where you guys are in terms of the idea of bringing in decentralized technologies that align with the Burning Man ethos to help facilitate the culture and like perpetuate the culture and the coordination among artists and attendees as well.
Which kind of decentralized technologies are you specifically thinking?
Blockchain.
Blockchain.
I don't know anything about blockchain, but I'm sure maybe we could help out more artists with more blockchain. Possibly.
I have a friend who I met a couple of years ago, and he is working on a project that I think is really interesting. That is related to the blockchain, and it is related to governance. And he and I talked a lot about it not being pure anarchy, that everybody has all the exact equal votes, because it will just create, it stalls things out. But his vision is the system gives people points for your authority or your expertise, sort of like you can see that in Reddit, some places like that. And that then the groups become very transparent about their documentation and how they create their meetings and what kind of decisions they make. And I love what he's working on. He's not finished it yet, but I think from where I'm sitting, I really like him because he's trying to create something that I think Burning Man would run better. Like, it's kind of blasphemous to say, but for instance, I just use the DMV as an example. Our DMV has 3 or 4 volunteers and then a team of another 20 volunteers. But the actual owners of the art cars aren't really involved in the decision making. So what would it look like if the decisions to bring art cars to Burning Man or the criteria that need to change over the years, what would it look like? And I think the only way to do that would be for a technology tool for the community and the leadership that are doing it, but for the leadership to be able to let go a little bit. I think, I think what Katie does is amazing, but imagine what she does and we created through the architecture, what part of that could be decentralized? And I only think it's only through technology that we can do that. It's like physically not possible for her to interview everybody here that might be interested in art and then like look at everybody's resume. But I think technology and some of these decentralized tools and through the blockchain and trust networks could make it so that Katie could easily be a member of a leader of experience, but a member of a group making new decisions around art. So I like what you're talking about. I'm not as afraid of it as some people are.
That's good. I like that. I like to hear that.
My one last little bit about that is I find one of the coolest things about Burning Man is the iterative process. Like that's why it's still interesting to even work there because you get another chance every year. And how Taylor talked about failure can be celebrated because we get another chance every year. So that's why experimentation is so. We talk about that so much too because it comes back around again every time. And so I feel like that's our kind of growing edge, or what other ways can we keep finding to experiment, to keep iterating on what we've done and not be a mentality of like, this is how it's done, but to really keep pushing, like what's our growing edge around this stuff. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for asking that.
Thank you guys, good questions. I think that's a great place to end our discussion.
Yeah, the only thing, if you guys, there are some people from Burning Man HQ here, if you would raise your hand. Ms. Miranda's one of the Rising Sparks. And there's some Rising Sparks community team members here. Raise your hand. I do that only because if you have questions, the last time I was here, everybody came at me. But those that raise your hands are resources. That's why they're here. That's why they're part of this team. So if you have a question for any of the three of us, or the Rising Sparks, or the Burning Man team members over there,
We did want to call out that we have an event happening on Saturday, March 21st. It's called the Vernal Equinox, kind of like the vernal equinox, because it's halfway through, like I'm talking about the iterative thing, we're halfway through the year, so we're like almost, around to the next Burning Man event. It's going to be at Public Works on Saturday, March 21st. There's a QR code back there, so please come, you're all welcome.
So thanks, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was awesome.
What's your name? Breezy. Nice to meet you. Brings a really good question. Fiery person. Leo. Capricorn moon. I call business. Up here. I can't stop thinking about business. I can't stop thinking about the market. Yeah, no, I was gonna raise another question and be like, you guys accept Bitcoin? Are you holding in Bitcoin? Because it would free up a lot of and they can be more creative. Living here in crypto?
Yeah, I like to call it blockchain.
Yeah, crypto is a dirty word. For me, it's a dirty word. I only know one. No, I never did.
Here's a postcard. I know it was my giveaway. I stopped it. Cheers. Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it's funny, like that's so funny. You know, it's I love that. I didn't get no ARL. We do not have that. I mean, okay, Carol, I'm telling you, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Oh, okay, so I think we didn't have a conversation. Wait, what about that this year? What if you have a solid year?
Well, you work here now, so right? That's beautiful. mean, yeah, I think I know people that are.
You're going to.
Yeah.